Today we have a Things Hidden panel assembled in the conversation of anthropology as it relates to the topic of possessions. We've been exploring this topic through the course of the last few weeks with various different programs, and we're going to continue that with another angle looking at the diabolical from the perspective of 5 contemporary American case studies as reported by the popular book Hostage to the Devil by the late Malachi Martin. The book was published in 1976. It has since been republished in 1992 in an update, but the book continues to be something that is very controversial. It has got lots of different accolades. Looking at the opening about Malachi Martin, the Dallas Morning News says in biblical times they would have called him a prophet. The New York Times book review says Martin is concerned with the fate of modern man. He has an ability to argue a case very forcefully and make strong judgments. Chicago Daily News says he gives fascinating, almost poetic accounts of religious experiences. San Francisco Examiner says there is a magnetism about him that draws from others' thoughts and feelings that they didn't know they were there. He is a weaver of spells with words. Psychology Today Book Club says one of the world's most scholarly yet passionate authors, Malachi Martin, is probably one of the finest writers alive. Baton Rouge Sunday Advocate says his writing is moving and intelligent, and in his writing he has won a victory over the forces of evil. And it's interesting to think these are mainstream newspapers talking about someone who would be a very arch traditional conservative Catholic. But I guess by that standards, it was just a Catholic still, mostly, maybe not. But it's interesting how they describe his book and his work as he recounts the possession and exorcism of 5 Americans. So joining me in this discussion is 2 individuals who have been reading through this book at the same time to give us their thoughts. We have Jordan Landfear and Surit Dasgupta. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing fine.
Good.
Glad to be here.
Let's start with these this kind of general thoughts. The book deals with 5 cases: Zio's friend and the Smiler. That's the first one. These are just kind of like nicknames that they give for the different stories of these real folks. Father Bones and Mr. Nash, the Virgin and the Girl Fixer, Uncle Ponto and the Mushroom Super, the Rooster and the Tortoise. Those are the 5 stories. And then they have some other things that kind of explore the different natures, manual of possession, good, evil in the modern mind, human spirit and Lucifer, human spirit and Jesus, the process of possession. And they have a story that bookends the book called about Father Michael Strong, who deals with some frightening things. But just, I want to get Surit's perspective. What do you think of the overall book as you've engaged it so far?
I've been reading it like a novel, to be honest with you, and there's no way to verify this claim. I'm just reading it like a novel, and I'm just trying to uh, observe all of this through a mimetic lens, an anthropological lens.
Jordan?
Yeah, I've thought it was pretty enlightening in terms of dealing with the other side of the supernatural, it seems, because we ponder where Satan is or how he's working in our lives, but it really illuminated me on the little things that I do throughout a given day. Am I doing my best to counteract what Satan's doing in my life? Or am I inviting him to take a more proactive approach in his schemes and allowing him to move and work freely and have my being.
So it seems like Jordan took on a more spiritual interpretation of the text, while Surit, you remain more skeptical as you read it. Is that?
Yes, to be honest, I have my reservations about the author But you know, like I said, I'm just I can't really disprove it, and there's really no other way to see what's right, or you know what's sensationalized, or that kind of stuff. So it's just I'm trying to at the moment, what I've been trying to do is I'm trying to draw parallels with the other stories of possessions that that's available online,
Yeah.
and in writing as well. So I do see a lot of similarities. A lot of them have been covered in movies. Like for example, the levitation thing. The superhuman strength. Malachi Martin describes in this book that it was multiple people have to hold down the possessed while they're performing the ritual. So there are similarities, and there's similarities across cultures as well, and across religions. So yeah, I'll give the author the benefit of the doubt in that regards, but at the same time, I have a kind of healthy skepticism can draw an objective conclusion.
Um, when you look at the book, though, let's get into some of the stories. We are going to look at this from a mimetic theory influence perspective as well as a spiritual level. You have different cases presented. The first one of which is about a young lady who gets into some confusion early on when she's in school, when she's talking to a nun, and the nun is using traditional reason and exploring, medieval style arguments for the truth, and using things like you cannot have being and non-being at the same time, which somehow bothered this young lady and irritated her, and she felt the need to argue against that and say, why can't you have that? You're trying to control me by saying that you cannot have both being and non-being at the same time. Anybody have any thoughts on kind of that whole process that was described in that first case study?
To be honest, because I listened to it, um, and so for me, that first story, it was hard to get into because I was trying to get, it takes a little bit on audio to feel out the author and how he does things. And so what you realize when you read the book or listen to it, um, he's sort of jumpy in his illustration of the moment. So he'll backtrack and go like 30 years prior. And so it took me a little while to get. So I honestly, I need to listen to that story. I got sort of in his rhythm as the book went along, and so I was able to capture more of the nuances in the stories. But just from hearing what David just said again, being and non-being, um, that's kind of a central tenet of 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 Christianity, of of having Christ at once, and you being you still, and being a light. So it's very interesting in that aspect. And then I'd like to hear what you have to say, sir, on where Gerard fits in with that story.
It really lines up a lot with what Gerard wrote about undifferentiation, and just eliminating all boundaries, like and also on top of that, not only the not only is there chaos established through the elimination of boundaries, because that girl, her name is Marianne, right? That's the first case.
Yeah.
Who becomes possessed later on.
Yeah.
So there's a description of how she had grown up with her brother, and it says the author writes that both of them were very close to one another. So as they grew up and started going to, I think it was college, right?
Yeah.
So they started going to college. They drifted apart more and more. So it's really no surprise that as you come to see, isolation, alienation plays a big part in how this girl, who seemingly a very from a very devout Catholic family, getting her straight into the education program and all of that, getting her exposing her to these rational ideas. They have strong parallels with how the youth of our time get into nihilistic ideology. How she challenges the teacher, who is a nun, I believe. She starts challenging the teacher just for the heck of it. That's how it starts. There's a growing anger and frustration for some reason that comes out of isolation, because she's away from her brother now. Because of that, she grows frustrated, isolated, and right out of the blue, I mean, you can just draw similarities to what we've just went through for the last 3 years, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason why power hungry elites have just tried to put us all indoors and encouraged us to stay locked away in our houses. Just do not interact, do not talk to anyone at all.
I was that made me remember that, every single one of these cases, they had choices to make. And ultimately, with the level of isolation of all five of them, it almost, in it almost becomes a self scapegoating, right? Because you're in isolation and you choose to to give space and give a moment for not having change, for not having community, for not growing. Like, a lot of these cases have immense amount of chaos around them too, with these people and in their past. So there's multiple levels to this, but every single one of us as humans, we all have these levels to us. Sir, you've got your past, David has his past, I've got mine. And we need to acknowledge it, we need to be aware of it. But if you allow yourself to go a time in isolation, in immense isolation, without remaining tethered to the body of Christ, then you have no cord to pull you back from. You're stranded in an ocean, and nobody can help. Nobody can pull you back. And so that was alarming to me, just because I remember back in times of my life in isolation, and I made choices that were sort of poor at times. And it was mainly because of that. I didn't have a community backing me, that sort of gold standard behind me that says, hey, come on, you know um let's go here, or let's get a cup of coffee, let's get together. I think that's vital.
Well, I think the separation from her brother, that really struck me, in a very personal way. Not saying that I am separated from any of my family members or close friends right now, but I'm just saying that we've all been through that. As you mentioned, we've all been through that phase where we've been in isolation, and you're right, we have to make choices when we're in that isolation. And we can read the lives of the saints, how especially the desert fathers, who spend time in isolation, battle demons, keep themselves afloat through prayer and repentance, and not to get discouraged. I think that's a very key element, because uh, when we look at the the current generation, the kids who are spending time, Zoom meetings, and away from, friends and away from social life. I think this is a pathway to what we can certainly call possession. I mean, if you look at some of the stuff on social media, TikTok videos, Instagram videos or whatever, the ethical level, the moral level has gone below ground zero. And I sometimes think if there is any coming back from this.
Mm. Yeah, I think again, I think Kanye or Ye has been pretty open about saying that Instagram is very similar to pornography. You know, it's like
It is.
this is a common place for tweens, uh really adolescent people, and they have complete access to this day in and day out, and that's a crime.
I want to see, what do you think more about that first Exorcist case study? How some of the different details of bizarre behavior and thought process going on. I think that like you said, the internet, they didn't have the internet back then, so she wasn't using that to get alienated, but this entity kept visiting her when she was at the park bench. She was just staring at pigeons and things. You want to get into that a little bit?
Well, yeah, I mean, the internet did not exist back then, but the spirit, the counter cultural revolution was in full swing, I believe, in the late 50s. It's very ironic, because the first initial step of her possession starts with inside a classroom. What do you think about that? I think there's a strong sense of deja vu in that, when we look at what's happening in the classrooms of today.
But in
With
this case, she was in a Catholic nun that was teaching her good traditional stuff or something. So it's not the same as the classrooms teaching crazy nihilism stuff today, right? But then later on, it says she
That's
goes to a
true.
university and she's studying physics and things like that, and she starts writing physics equations all day and mathematical equations. But which part of the classroom experience are you referring to? The first part where she's being taught by the nun about traditional logic.
Yes,
That
that's one. That's the one. Yeah.
you think do you think that those were do you think that was a portal opening up uh, bad ideas in her heart, or just that what?
Well, even though she was in a Catholic school, there was I mean, the format is the same, right? It's the same classroom setting that we have. The only thing is, it's not the ideology behind the format is different. So uh, there's a certain thing, that I don't know. There's something about the classroom setting where it's like very mimetic, and you're basically encouraged to really get up and show that you're something of a big shot when you're in these classrooms, among other peers. So
You're saying the
what do
corporate
you think?
classroom setting, even in a good school, can invite some mimetic
Oh yes,
darkness. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, that's true.
And undifferentiation. When you are told to the class is over, we're going to the lunchroom, and you stand in a line. you know it's hard, and when you're all in a uniform, that's the other thing, is your shirts all match, your pants all match, your shoes all match. So now who is who? Especially when you have hair length protocols as well, so it's got to be above your ears. So where did that child get left behind?
It's important to be among your loved ones in order to have good positive mimesis. I'm not saying that children should be shut off in an isolated, or they should be, you know, away from making friends and all of that. But I'm just saying, that there's something uh, very vicious in the modern world that really escapes our eyes, and we're not allowed to question it all of the time, because that's the school setting is one example. A lot of people have, taken it as a given, that that is the only form of education that's available to us. And I think that really tells us something, because how, how many, I don't know about you guys, but how many of you were, exposed to addiction, substance abuse, not only the indoctrination stuff, but all of these evil, horrible things. And why do these things often happen in classrooms?
Mm.
Like, we don't see, like, it happening in any families. Like, it happens in families, but only in the rarest of instances. Why do all of the gross, degenerate stuff happen in schools?
Yeah, that makes me think of what Soren Kierkegaard said, that the crowd is dumb, and that again, that leads us right into all of Girard's work. But that sea of sameness, ooh, it's I think that's what it has to do. When you ask the state to do something that the church should be doing, I think that's the start of it. And like David said, well, this is a Christian school. um you know it it changes the game when you're not learning from your parents, when you don't have that headship from within your home. I think that's a vital blow, when the family is not organized and not together on educating their children. Some of the biggest complaints that public education teachers have is the participation of the family and the breakdown that those children have on a day-to-day basis. And so when you have this reliability on that other person to do the work that you should be doing, and or well, I need to make another dollar, that's everything. That's everything, because you've just lost your child and you've just sold it to a slave trade.
What's the slave trade?
Education. 7 hours a day. Do the math on 7 hours a day times 5 times uh, 12 years, and that's before college.
That's the amount of time that a kid spends imitating a servant of the government, or
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
in a private school setting. So the kids learns how to be a good employee,
Mm,
as opposed to learning how to be a good father or a husband,
mm.
or a loving Christian.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying that a kid should not be a good employee when he grows up, but I'm saying that you can see the balance is tilted,
Mm,
to one extreme.
And recalling one of the moments in the exorcism of this Marianne, text says, catching them all unawares, Marianne jerked free and sat bolt upright on the bed. Opening her mouth in a narrow slit, she emitted a long wailing howl, which seemed to go on without pause for breath and in full blast for almost a minute. Everyone was thrown back physically by the force of that cry. It was not piteous, nor was it of hurt or appeal. It was much more like what they imagined a wolf or a tiger should sound like, quote, when caught and disemboweled slowly, unquote, as the ex-policeman described it. It was an embodiment and sound of defiance and infinite pain. It confused and distressed them. Marianne's father burst into tears, biting his lip to stifle his own voice. He wanted to answer her. One moment it made you afraid, said Peter's young colleague. Peter is the exorcist of this case. Uh, and he had a colleague there that was a priest too. Said young colleague in recalling the moment, quote, another moment it made you cry. Then you were shocked. So it went. It confused. By the time she was silent, they had recovered and had her pinned down again. She did not resist. The smile was back on her mouth, twisting her lips in a corkscrew shape. She was very cold to the touch. Her body was still relaxed. The first words that came from her were calm. Who are you? Do you come to disturb me? You do not belong to the kingdom, yet you are protected. Who are you? So there's a lot of interesting things here. One is they're describing they're scared. They don't know whether to cry and sadness. You have pity, and yet you're shocked and confused. It is confusion. Satan is the author of confusion. And so you have mixed emotions here. You have a tiger noise that sounds like being disemboweled slowly. I mean, I don't even know how could even someone come up with an imagery like that? And then you have that's an example. Was that Malachi Martin's example? Or I mean, I think we have no reason to say he's lying. So I guess that's the actual police officer who was there to observe the exorcism. But you have these interesting things there about undifferentiation. Is it sadness that we should have? And I think it's a reflection of the spirits there, that the spirits, and Gerard says from an anthropological perspective, that the satanic kingdom is the absence of being. It's the parasitical negation of being. And that's why crowds are often the domain of Satan, because when you're caught up in a crowd, you lose sense of your own mental sovereignty, so to speak, in terms of being able to be aware of your conscience and be in tune with what's right and wrong from a spiritual standpoint. And so when you're swept up in a crowd, you can easily get into a state of confusion and undifferentiation where you will go along with ridiculously evil and hateful things that are very, very hard to explain as an individual afterwards. But just interesting here, the sound here, like a tiger caught and disemboweled slowly. I mean, that sounds like the anguish that the demonic spirits go through, that they've made their choice and they're eternally beset by that choice. They're eternally condemned by that choice, and they're in pain as well as, they're very, very much in pain. And the spirit of our time today is very much one that is about trying to really to really spread a spirit of self-hatred. And that's what you see in that description there of what the scene's about.
There's a very obvious dehumanizing process that's going on here. The roar of a tiger making the possessed individual into an animal, right? And that really, betrays the motive of these demons. According to the story, I believe these demons, they want to make human beings so animalistic, devoid of image of God in them. It's very interesting because this possessed individual, she had this theory stuck in her head where she argues that, what was it, existence through non-existence or something like that. We can be existing and non-existing at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's like, again, as we have mentioned, that it's a elimination of boundaries, like not only physical boundaries but metaphysical boundaries as well. And this is a process, which we really don't have to see demonic possessions to see how this virus has spread throughout society. Like you can see this inversion of meaning happening all around us in news media and government propaganda, whatever. And what do these inversion seek, right? What do they wish to do? They wish to eliminate all meaning and turn us into animals, so that we're only satisfied in eating and drinking and sleeping and just following uh, the master's command. And I'm talking in all levels, right? In societal, as well as in all areas of our life, not only in the political sphere, but also in the cultural manner. And I think this case of possession, it conveys that, to me at least, it conveys that message.
Yeah, I just keep going back to that complete isolation and her not not finding a self within it and thinking that it's just I can just I mean, like you said, it's all facets of society, and there's levels to what she's saying and doing in that moment. You know, um, how often do we come to a place of comfort and desire to just reside there on that little easy train as long as we can? That's the same. That's the same spirit of evil. Um, and eventually it's gonna wreak havoc, and it's gonna cry out from within you, uh because that's not a place of life, that's not a place of vitality. Nothing good resides, um taking in taking the easy path in life. It's always the difficult way, it's always pushing off yourself, it's always seeking another, seeking charity, seeking generosity. Those are the ways to vitality, and they're never easy. It's always a thorn in the flesh. I get up early for work often, and it's so difficult. I mean, I want to pull my eyelids off every time I get up. I want to just cover those, take those sheets and just wrap them over me and make it impossible for me to get out. So it's like I'm putting a bondage on myself to stay where I'm at. Um, and I think that's what that cry is the David's quote there, or in the quote from the book that David said, well, who are you? What is your place here? In a right mind, you can recognize spirit for what it is. You can recognize somebody that's got a clean personality, a clean presence in a room. And she's unable to do that anymore. Which is obviously why she's taken part in a possession. But that's that she got what she wanted. She got the absence of being, in that moment.
Yeah, it says that going back into the early stages of Marianne's life when she was in school, um, her interests were physics and philosophy. And she said she wanted to know the full truth, to know it all. But then what she found out was that the teachers found out that it seemed like, rather than there didn't seem to be any desire on her part to find out something true or to deepen her knowledge, only a disturbing viciousness, a stony-faced cunning with words and arguments alternating with a sardonic silence and smirking satisfaction, all leading to confusion and curiously bitter derision.
Mm.
It all came to a head one afternoon. The lecture concerned the principle of contradiction. This is what I was referencing earlier. If something exists, if something is, then it cannot but exist. It cannot not be at the same time and under the same respect, concluded Mother Virgilius in her high pitch. The table is here. While it is here, it cannot be here. It cannot not be here. Being and non-being cannot be identified. As she finished, Marianne's hand shot up. Why can't they be identified? They had been over this ground interminably. The nun had no more answers and no more patience. Marianne, we will discuss this later. You say that because you cannot prove it. You just presume it. First principles cannot be proven. Why can't I have another first principle? Say, being and non-being are inseparable. The table is here because it isn't here. God exists because he doesn't exist at the same time. A titter ran around the class. Marianne rounded on her classmates. It's no joke. We exist and we don't exist. This is undifferentiation right there. That's a calling card for the loss of all boundaries. That's what we're all dealing with in our culture today.
Yeah.
You know, that you can be any identity you want. You can have anything, you know, you can have any desire you want. This is what happens when, and then if you think of Rene Girard's concept of Satan being the absence of being, a parasitical being, well, it makes sense. That's the kind of thought process that would be tempted in her heart at that point to start dabbling with those thinking, is to surrender to the concept that being and non-being are somehow, something that can exist at the same time. Well, that's exactly what something that wants you to imitate him would want you to think, right? Because if God is being itself, and that we are made in his image, right, then we wouldn't have a problem with that. But if you're being tempted into the inversion of that, then you're going to try to figure out a way to, pervert that thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's an infinite regress, right? And if you don't have a model to emulate, as Rene Girard says,
Mm-hmm.
which is the nature of human beings, if you don't have a god to emulate, then you don't really have anyone to emulate. You fall into infinite regress.
Yeah.
Who are you
Mm-hmm.
going to emulate? Like the human being whom you are emulating, whom you are imitating, that person is imitating someone else. So where does that, omega point end?
Um,
It ends nowhere. It ends in non-being.
Mm-hmm.
Gradually, she extended the same premise. All authorities in my life are phonies because they repeat what they are told and never inquire. That is the foundation by which a lot of folks in millennial generation and on, and even older than that, of course, have rejected Christianity because, right, it's this kind of suspicion of authorities in general, and
Mm-hmm.
that if you're repeating something you were told, therefore you're an idiot, right? And if you haven't learned the new, and it's interesting that she was dabbling with physics and philosophy, which are two pathways to attacking the legitimacy of Christianity in the world today,
Mm-hmm.
that have become so calcified in our institution that, in our institutional sense of what is intelligent, physics is so rarefied. Everybody knows there's something wrong with a lot of fundamental physics, but they don't know how to get out of it because they're stuck in equationism. And then philosophy, the same kind of thing. These have been tools to undermine the legitimacy of the Christian tradition, because
Mm-hmm.
if you are saying something that you've repeated from somebody else, therefore that's illegitimate.
What's ironic about that that exact sentence is, you can come to a physics textbook, or you can come to a philosophical textbook, and yet you take those things as granite and stone without question. And if you do question, you're dehumanized right then and there. However, when it comes to Christianity and spiritual things, those can get torn apart and twisted and thrown against the wall and spat on and ran over in the road, and they've got to be made new, as you said.
By the way, isn't it?
And so that's funny that you can fundamentally agree upon everything that's in a textbook, yet when you come to something spiritual, no, that can't be passed down. That can't be mimeticized.
I can't. I was thinking about quantum physics. Says that rests on the premise that light can be both a wave and particle, the wave particle duality, which sounds like being and non-being right there.
Mm.
It's the foundation for quantum physics is as a kind of statement similar to that.
Mm.
Interesting. Going on to this text, her parents knew nothing of philosophy, and when Marianne spoke darkly of how good it is to see all the no's side by side with the yeses, or of dirt on the nose of the Venus de Milo, or of murder as an act of beauty, as real as composing a sonata, they were bewildered. They only knew that they loved her, but manifestations of that love were taken by Marianne as chains thrown around her. I mean, that's what we hear today
Mm.
from the woke stuff, this kind of, anything
Mm.
Christianity is all about. Christianity gave birth to slavery and their twisted view of the world, their know-nothing worldview. Christianity is enslaving you with chains of boundaries, telling you to wait till marriage. Christianity is chaining you down by telling you not to be all genders at all times. Christianity is bringing you down by not allowing you to otherize the police officer, otherize the other figure of a different race, and turn them into a monster and tear down their statues with glee. All of this is the same thing. It says, this is one of the quotes they said for Marianne: "If only you could hate me, Mummy, just for 5 minutes, we would get along so well," she said once to her mother. At another time, "Why doesn't Daddy rape me or break my nose with his fist? Then I would see my beauty, and he would be real for me." So there's a big emphasis in art and modern art to glorify ugliness and brokenness. You think about the piece of art that the CIA and others were funding, the Piss Christ, where it shows a crucifix in a urinal. You see what I mean? Where is this coming from? It's no wonder that the intelligence agencies were dabbling with remote viewing and all these other things. And by the way, which could have opened up a lot of entities and may have, if we look at the story and I'm going to investigate it further. There was an incident in Fort Bragg, which is known for where a lot of the intelligence research stuff happens and clandestine operations with remote viewing. The CIA was involved with this stuff. And apparently Malachi Martin was brought in. The author of this book was brought in to perform an exorcism by the United States government on some of the members of the United States military who had been dabbling with remote viewing and all these different parapsychology phenomenon on this Fort Bragg base. This was back in the 80s, and they're going to make a movie about it, allegedly. But isn't it interesting that all these things about, today's art is all about, brokenness is beautiful and, all this type of thing. And it's a little bit different from what she's talking about here. But
Well, if you listen to all the lyrics of the songs that are coming out today, they're all dysfunctional. They're all celebrating dysfunction. Like, give me an example of a pure lyrical song that you've seen in the last 10 years. All the rap songs are like dissing on each other, and it just goes on and on. It's like it's called being gritty, keeping it real.
Yeah. 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 And then you realize that it's a half truth, because the other end of it is never explored or talked about, right? The other end of it is Christ's resurrection, right? He was ugly. He was maimed. He did suffer. He bled. He was tortured. That is something detestable. But what happened after that was not. That's glorious. And the fact that, if that's the satanic lie and how it sinks in, right? Is that, well, my ugliness stops with me. Well, what Jesus allowed himself to put himself through was so ugly, yet look at what it has accomplished through history. You know, the things that he declared are still coming true 2,000 years later. The product that he put out into the market is is still in business today in an in a way to talk about it in sort of an economic sense.
Yeah, you're talking about redemption, redemption through suffering.
Yeah. And that's the in this story of her, that's what she's lacking the most. You know, and like you said, you know, when your model is another and not the father in your home, when his boundaries aren't upheld, um and you know, none of us are perfect, but if he's not giving boundaries, and then she can't see the beauty beyond those boundaries and how they're actually freeing, if that's never um an application within her home, then there's no priest in her home. And so you are inviting the satanic influence. And that's why I said what I said about comfort. You know, when you give your home away to the god of comfort and the demonic force therein, you will lose. You will get eaten like 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 the tiger that has its bowels. You know, you will be destroyed. That's not a that's not a whimsical theory. That's fact, and those are from Jesus's lips. Satan comes to kill, steal, and destroy, and those are that's as real as my face on this screen.
Yeah,
When it describes when she goes to Washington Square Park and she sits down reading her textbooks, making notes. One afternoon in 1956, she was reading William James' Varieties of Religious Experience. She felt suddenly, but without any sense of shock, that someone was bending over her shoulder and looking at the pages of her book. She looked around. He was a rather tall individual whose face and clothes never impressed themselves on her memory. His left hand was resting on the back of the park bench. Her one clear memory is only of his mouth and the regular teeth she glimpsed behind his lips as he read repeatedly from the open page of her book the words, "When you find a man living on the ragged edge of his consciousness," running all the words as one sentence several times over and over again without pause or stop. The mouth kept repeating and repeating, "On the ragged edge of consciousness, on the ragged edge of consciousness, on the ragged edge of consciousness." It was done softly, without hurry, without emphasis, until the words became a slowly whirling carousel in her ears, and her mind moved in circles, bumping against them on all sides. She burst into tears. The mouth said still softly, "They are all pushing you along the ragged edge. Want to get off of it?" She remembers a few things. She said through her tears, "I don't want them to help me, just to leave me alone." He sat with her for about 1 hour. The left hand remained visible in her memory, and the mouth. She remembers nothing else of him except that there were instructions. "Don't let any man touch you. You have a short time to reach your true self. Come and find me regularly." And there was one peculiar instruction. "Seek those of the kingdom. They will know you. You will know them." It was from this time that her family and acquaintances noticed definite changes in Marianne. She disappeared from home for long mornings and afternoons, even when there were no lectures or lab work at college. She spoke rarely with her parents. Her meals at home grew less frequently. Her contemporaries at the college noticed that she became more introspective, more fearful of strangers, more reticent with those who knew her, and extremely shy.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like it sounds like a liturgy was practiced over her. That's Satan's liturgy. You know, when we perform liturgy, you know, we there's a lot of repetition in a slow manner without necessarily an emphasis. And that's what makes me think of that. And then it's a priestly um recommendation to come visit with me, come meet with me of your own accord. Again, it's a choice. Um, And so to me, that's that's the way Satan wins, is when he can repeat something in your mind over again and make you feel relaxed with it. And it's an untruth, it's a half truth. And it's not the whole truth, because God never calls us I mean, even a monk doesn't live alone. Even a nun doesn't live alone. They live in community, and they have community, and they break bread together. And so then she takes that liturgy and isolates herself with it. She takes that liturgy and shuts off from meeting new people, um, exploring those around her. And so the liturgy is isolation.
Her parents took
Yeah.
her to took her to a psychiatrist, and after a couple of sessions, dismissed her. Told the parents that she needed more nourishment because she'd been losing weight and much love, and could detect nothing awry or dangerous in her psychology. She just wanted to be free, and this was, he said, the new generation. Anyway, he advised them they should be thinking of her age. She's got rebellion and independence were normal for her age bracket. So again, that reminds me of the book, Was the Sexual Revolution a Government Psyop? I mean, it's an article by Matthew Crawford and Unheard that I've referenced before. And it talks about the invention of some of this new modern psychology as a means of displacing the church from having authority in the minds of the people of the culture. And it was used ostensibly that this modern form of psychology and therapy culture that was practiced in America and now the world over was used because they were concerned that pilots in World War II were having reticence going through with enough bomb campaigns. They were getting morally offended by going through with it. And the government wanted to say, what's going on with them? Why can't they complete their missions? And they wanted, and these so-called genius psychologists said, well, they've got proto-fascist sensibilities that they've developed from their working class Christian traditional values and worldview, which had boundaries and differentiation all through it. And they needed to eliminate that. So they created this psychology field that we still have to this day. And you see how woefully inadequate it is at dealing with the reality of things like what Marianne was going through here, because they thought, well, she's just going through some rebellion. It's just normal.
Yep.
They have nothing to stand on with their worldview here.
If you can see this in the boot camps as well, that the drill instructor, his job is basically uh, to just hammer the recruits with abuse after abuse after abuse, to the point where it's become normalized. It's become a normal state of being. So they're being made into killing machines, right? And
And that's one of the reasons why. That's one of the that's one of the reasons I have a problem with militarism in the church, because look, you could talk about which church is right, Protestants, Orthodox, Christian, Catholic, whatever. But largely in America, at least, and I think probably the whole world mostly, these churches have been rather impotent at warning their parishioners about the dangers of going into something like boot camp, right, sir? I mean, to be turned into a killing machine. When you have a view that God can be a killing machine any other minute, then what's the problem with turning my son into a killing machine to be used for murderous purposes? Because Uncle Sam is godly compared to everybody else that he's battling. And come on, I mean, that needs to be repented of. And I don't care what branch it is; they've all been sending their people into these killing machines. What'd you say, sir?
Well, I'm just wondering, because to even make these kind of statements, it's considered so radical, so I mean, people would often accuse you of being, pushing boundaries when you make these kind of analysis. But, it's just, a, a commentary on how a society is, because that boot camp formula is universal. It's not only in the US, it's not only in, Europe, it's all over the world. Why is it, I mean, I guess this is the same thing that I was pointing to when I was mentioning the state of education, the classrooms and everything, is that all of these things are very dehumanizing, and that's not a coincidence, right? Why are they so dehumanizing? Why do you need to be like treated like a unit, like a number, in each and every one of these institutions, right? And the highest office of the institution is basically a scapegoat. That's like that's surreal to me if you think about it.
Mm.
Maybe there are demonic forces behind all of these things. You know,
Mm.
maybe it's not just one group, or it's like one nationality, or one thing. Maybe these maybe actual demons are in control of our institutions
Mm.
and our culture and our doctrines and all of these things. You know,
Mm.
because they're so prevalent. These evil, nihilistic things.
Mhm.
She uh as she continued to fall into this possessed state, she found herself drawing inverted crosses side by side with upright crosses. But she could, that's again an attack on differentiation and boundaries. You want to have a cross upright, let's have it inverted. That's what we see all around. Like you said, diabolical worldview is what we have today. Oh, you want to say that beauty is this? Well, beauty is also, the opposite of what we consider to be beauty. If you want to say, showing up on time is good, well, now we're going to make that a white supremacy. To show up on time for your job is white supremacy. It's evil.
Well, and we've
That's the
even
demonic. That's you can tell this is demonic because if you're using this case study as a playbook of how they can approach that, they're doing that. What'd you say?
Yeah. And gluttony. Gluttony has been used as a tool for beauty now.
Yeah.
Um,
It says she says that in the story, the whole process was an acquisition of the naked light and her marriage with nothingness. Expression she learned from the man, this figure that she remembered as this kind of like figurehead moving her towards this process of total possession. She said, I reacted to all things, people and things and happenings as if they were one side of the real coin, and I rapidly found that all people have a powerful force in them. As humans, people, things, events challenge us to respond. The way we respond gives the things we respond to a special quality. In a sense, we make them what they turn out to be for us. I think that's talking about mimesis, a little bit there. Mimesis is the way we respond is everything, right? People have their own. She's saying that because demons are going to give you some truth, right? And then they're going to give you insights into the way the world works so that you feel compelled to keep going down in their approach to life. And, looking at people and saying that they have a powerful force in them, and the way we respond to that is basically everything, right? So if someone gives mimetic desire towards you of positivity or negativity, the way you respond to that is going to be extremely vital to what happens in your life.
And she's very sensitive to this thing called the flow.
Yeah.
uh, if her flow is disturbed, then she goes out of whack, like she goes crazy. But what is that flow?
Yeah.
That's very interesting to
Yeah.
think about.
She came to, I think here's where it talks a little bit about that. She found the company of others exasperating and destructive. To talk with another softened the sharp edge of her perception. To do anything with another meant clothing herself in false clothes and not being wholly herself. To feel, think about the demoniac in the Gadarene story, by the way. Remember, he's hanging out in the Bible. He's on the northern side of the Galilee in the town of the Gadarenes, which is a pagan town, and he's hanging out in the tombs. He's away from everybody. So And he's self-stoning himself, right? He's stoning himself. Just like she remembered what she said to her father, and her mother, horrible things about herself. Well, this possessed man that is possessed by Legion, the spirit of military empire, just like maybe America and other places are possessed to various degrees. They're possessed by the same spirit of self-hatred and isolation. It says to talk with another, soften the sharp edge of her perception, to do anything with another meant clothing herself in false clothes and not being wholly herself. Well, we know that we are made to be individual. So that's an attack on individuality, right? Is that the self is constructed in a relationship with another. And so by saying, don't, draw away from those people, that is trying to get her to deny the positive benefits of positive mimesis, positive interindividual relationship between the other that a Trinitarian worldview naturally is going to have, right? A natural relationship. The Holy Spirit is both person and relationship, and kind of connects Father and Son together in the Trinity. In the same way, human beings have a relationship between themselves that creates a positive community in the image of the Trinity. It says, ideally, she believed one should feel absolutely whatever one felt, whatever one thought, one should think completely, whatever one desired, one should desire totally, right? So that's, again, deification of mimetic desire. No concentration on self could be greater. Before she achieved absolute isolation, whenever she returned from a conversation or a meal with others, remember, we're supposed to gather together, have a meal, right? Or even after listening to a lecture or working in the laboratory, it was very difficult for her to regain the inner space and the single vision she had possessed. So if you're being tempted into the absence of being, in a Girardian type way of looking at the term of demonic, if you're being tempted to draw away from positive mimetic relationships, it's going to sound kind of like what she's describing here about being drawn away from people. It says that it was difficult to regain the inner space and the single vision she had possessed before such contact. She was left with a double vision. She was blurred, confused, and confusing in herself. She had to spend days doing her own thing, walking in the park, sitting in her apartment writing page after page, which she immediately tore up and which she never reread, sitting or standing still for hours until at least she was fully absorbed in the self that had been hiding. It makes me wonder, what about some of the mindfulness practices that some people get engaged in with, meditation practices? Not that all of them are evil, but, getting isolated from people. Then quite suddenly, all the clamor would fade out. In the presence of that inner self, all was naked again and absolute and secure. No longer was she interrupted or disrupted by the bad flow from others. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, and it's trying to again to get her isolated, trying to get her away from this Trinitarian so, society. Where it's like that's the thing with monotheism is that if you don't have a triune model, then really you are left in a state of where this girl is, right? She's cut off from all people and cut off from no one but this strange figure called the man, right? So when you're away from the flow, from this magnetic uh, energy that's flowing in creation, you know and I'm not saying that it's pantheistic, but I'm just saying that God's workmanship is in all of creation. And when we're cut away from creation, then we're cutting away from God in a certain sense.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah,
I
it's
call.
interesting. It's interesting about how, if that's the natural, Rene Girard calls the self the romantic lie, right? The idea that you have a true, unique self that's wholly isolated, that can create its own desires, self-generated, without any models to look to. Well, that's what they're tempting her to accept, right? Because if you
Mm.
read it, she says, as she reached more, at this, the book says, as she reached more and more permanent mastery of her isolation, she came to realize that the self she sought lay beyond, beneath, and behind the world of her psychophysical actions and reactions.
Mm.
Again, this is all mimetic reciprocity, out of reach of the endless rhythm of responses, of recordings on her memory, of the fast-paced hip chatter of her companions, of blaring
Mm.
monologues by individuals. She became slowly more sensitive and expectant that she would find the self she sought wrapped in semi-transparent shadows. It was independent, she believed, of that distracting outer world. This is an attack on the
Mm.
Trinitarian nature of mimetic
Yeah.
relationship
Yeah.
that they're drawing her towards. They want her to be in, but she's not going to be separated from that. It was, she believed of that distracting outer world and of her inner psychic theater, which was always at the mercy of that outer world and was so easily shattered by it. The restlessness of details had no place with the self. She came to believe that if she could prevent the bad flow of others entering, she could achieve perfection of personhood. One of my big realizations was that in any commerce with others, a conversation, working with them, even being in their presence while they talked and acted with others. Again, this would connect with what Dr. Yu has suggested. If our particles are made up of magnetism, dipolar magnetic poles on each particle, then there's a level of magnetic frequency and vibration that's involved with all of our relationship. When we walk into a room and we feel so-called sixth sense feeling of someone's in a bad vibe or something, that there's something physical there going on that's also connected to the spiritual world and the desire world that Rene Girard's talking about.
Yeah.
A
There's
conversation.
there's a verse right here from Paul, right, that answers this in the exact opposite vein. Though I am free and belong to no one, I have made myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. To the Jews, I become like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law, I become like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but am under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak, I became weak to win the weak. I have become all things to all people, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do all this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. So that's literally dead opposite of where she's at in her life in what you're reading.
Yeah. She says that there are two levels. She says there were two levels of flow of communication. One, the outer one, was as Marianne perceived it, the one with which she heard, saw, touched, tasted, smelled, remembered, and images conceptualized and verbalized. All of its functions could be duplicated by a skillfully built machine, a computer, for instance. That's like what AI is trying to do. A lot of it could be found in highly intelligent animals, but in human beings, you couldn't have this outer level of communication without the second level. The second level of communication was, Marianne believed, a flow or influence from each person to another. And whenever two human beings communicated, they did so on both levels simultaneously. And they did so even if they didn't know it or wouldn't admit it. So again, this is very interesting stuff because this is tapping into, again, the physics that we've explained with Dr. Yu's work of magnetism, which oftentimes, by the way, the occult uses magnetism. If you never looked at their esoteric writings, they're always talking about human magnetism and tapping into all these magic powers with magnetism. And it's interesting that, these entities are trying to give her some perceived deep insight into the nature of human magnetic desire and also mimetic desire, if you want to look at it without the physic component. If you just want to stay on that level, the anthropological component is just mimetic, reciprocal desires, pulling you this way and that way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
mean, it's very
oh,
interesting. Yeah, go ahead, John.
well, sir, you were talking about like we've been talking about the flow, but it's all over Facebook, right? When or anytime you can communicate on social media is like this toxic person is destroying my vibe right now, and you need to
Well, I
leave them.
mean,
You need to leave
it,
her. This person is narcissistic, and it's like that is again, that's dead opposite of interacting interpersonally. Now it's time. Sometimes there are times when you need to separate yourself, but it's like this uh like this person has become, or they say this one insignificant thing, or they make this look at me, oh, he's out, oh, away from me. And it just this cut off mentality, this I'm done with you, I have nothing to say for you anymore in my life. It's like that is not the way it's meant to be. We're meant to be in community, we're meant to be in struggle and strife, and work through things. That's where repentance and forgiveness come into play, and we work through things, and that's what makes you a better human being.
I mean, it. I recently watched this speech by this comedian Jimmy Dore at the peace rally that was recently held in DC, and he was giving us a list of the things that the government could do instead of sending billions to Ukraine for weapons and all of that. He said, shouldn't we all have blue check marks so that we can all be insufferable a-holes to each other on Twitter. As it's, if you get on the social media sites, if, I don't know about you guys, but the first temptation, I mean, the temptation is enormous to disagree with someone. I disagree with you, and you write that I mean, you write that in all caps or whatever,
That's called a
and
reply guy. Are you a reply guy?
I mean, everybody is a reply guy on Twitter, right? Who isn't replying to one another? So it's like, it's just it's no coincidence, because this is it's like something is built into that program, that social media program, where you're all you do is negative mimesis. And by negative mimesis, I mean, imitating the other person into being a rival, and just being you know disagreeable all the times. I mean, how many times have you seen people praising each other on the internet? It's very rare, right? It only happens when somebody's buddies really in tights with a person.
Mm.
So
No.
yeah.
It says when she gets into possession, when she's finally getting fully possessed here, as much as you can be, it says that the uh, seductive repulsiveness, that the thrill she felt stung her with a pain pleasure she had never dreamed possible. She had felt her whole being going quiet, self-aware, dissolving all the cobwebs, like falling in love with the open jaws of an alligator. Each splotch of its saliva, each hook of its teeth, each crevice in its mouth was animal, just animal and personal. And she had to keep saying yes to surrender to this nothingness. And its time seemed to stand still as a bestiary of animal sounds and smells and presences gradually flowed into her consciousness and mingled there with the sound of children laughing, the tones of workmen nearby calling out jokes, or snatches of conversation from couples passing along the pathway. All the sounds that had enlivened the morning when she had entered Bryant Park now seeped with a new odor of old and new corrupting things of corruption. And the snap of the air was filled with the fluid of grunts, snarls, hisses, bellowings, helpless bleatings. I've noticed in this story and other accounts that the demons like to bring the animalism out of humans, They think
Mhm.
of humans as just dirty animals, and they like to draw us back into that. So that's interesting that that's how they describe that situation.
That's because they want to destroy God's image, right? They want to make us equal to the animals. And I mean, it's very similar when we're talking about, for example, pro-choice or pro-life arguments. What's the one thing that you're not allowed to call the one that thing? You're not allowed to call that a baby. It's a fetus. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
Russians are called orcs in Ukraine, and I'm sure that the Russians have dehumanizing words for Ukrainians that they kill in the war. But yeah, you have to dehumanize your opponent to make it easier to kill them, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's why ultimately this is it's a self scapegoating is really what happening is the demon. You think every single one of those cases in the book, they think of themselves as being a part of what's possessing them. But like you just read, she makes choice over choice after choice after choice to go down this path. It's always her choice. And it's ironic that when the exorcist enters, they always either as they enter or before they've entered, they've already asked her or him, is this the road you want to go down of being exorcised? They always ask for permission. So it's a pulling away from the self-sabotage, from the self-sacrifice, um, uh, of uh, of what they're choosing to have happen to them in this scapegoating event. So
What would you
the demon can dehumanize you, make you an animal, and then from there it's on it. You will finish the job, right? And we find that out later in the book where he's about to jump off the cliff.
Jordan, you just said that it's always her choice, but that many atheists and even Christians have a problem with statements like that because their number one objection would be, is it really her choice when she doesn't know the consequences, the full extent of her consequences of her actions? What would you say to someone who says that?
I would say go back to the moment where she's with the nun, and the nun is leading her away from these opinions, and she chooses to reject it. That was a choice she made. And again, right then, she made choice after choice. Those are her words, maybe not necessarily. If we take these stories verbatim, um, as though that was on a tape, you know, he's saying that she said, "I'm making these choices," um, and so, I mean, yeah, all of those are hidden in plain sight. I mean, those are moments, and I would say they're massive moments in turning the tide on what ended up happening to her and what she allowed to happen to her.
Well, there's this other objection as well. Is you can even see it in many Christians, I believe, that it's when we're talking about these demonic things, we're talking about these demonic entities. These are just projections of our imaginations and all that. They're just made to deflect responsibility, you know,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
and
Yes.
it's a very interesting that you mentioned free will, choice into this, because you can see the flip side of the argument, what you just mentioned. If you discard the existence of the demonic entities, that's in a way scapegoating your neighbor, because that's I mean, really,
Yeah.
if you say that, all right, that person he's totally evil in of itself,
Mm.
and no one should suffer the consequence. And it's like you lose all points of empathy for a
Mm,
person if you see that, if you fail to see that, there's no demonic force that's, really twisting his worldview, or the girl's worldview, or whatever. You're
mm.
really, so it's very interesting, what you just said.
Yeah, that's really good.
And looking at the possession part of this story with Marianne, it's all about the demon recalls a nickname that the priest had been given by his girlfriend when he was a little boy in Ireland that only that girl knew and had passed away since. So try to get under his skin. Um, the It's constantly trying to draw him into talking about sexuality and mockery of the belief in God and beauty and love. And the exorcist has to keep focusing on love to get through it all and not be caught up by the intimidation tactics or distraction tactics being used, like a chest of drawers that keeps moving around while they're doing their exorcism right. The devil keeps trying to basically justify a kind of dualistic worldview, really.
It's more of a dialectical worldview than, that, if you, like, everything is a problem to be solved. Everything,
Yeah,
it's like a problem, antithesis, and, synthesis, right? And
Mm,
everything is dialectics. Everything. If
yeah,
your your eyes, the evidence you see with your eyes and you hear with your ears, they're all dialectics. It's like being trapped in a cycle,
yeah.
a
mhm.
never ending cycle. It never ends, and it's horrible.
Possible and
That's a
impossible, Marianne Cood. Make all human happenings impossible, posing, separating distinctions and partisans and perfunctory periods. And then Peter the exorcist says, if a man has any love for me, he will be true to my word. He was battering against the confusion, the numbing use of words that lull the mind toward nothingness. And then he shall love my Father, and we will both come to him and make our abode with him. In between us and our halves, Marianne interrupted, saying to the yin and me, thou shalt not have thine yang, saying to the yang and you, thou shalt not have a yin. Peter cut off Marianne again. The branch that does not live on in the vine can yield no fruit of itself. The very simplicity of the words gave Peter new blood. His voice was calm, no more than you. Making a male the creature of his dangling, screamed Marianne violently, and a female the bed of her and her. If you do not live on in me, Peter said at the top of his voice, I am the vine, you its branches. If a man lives on in me and I in him, then he tumby womb. Marianne was now snarling the words in a hoarse yell. So you have chaos versus order. You see that?
Mhm.
You have distinctions and differentiation, but love versus you know uh, like you were saying, dialectic. I see dualism there too, yin yang. This idea that, well, yeah, you can have your cross, but we get to have our upside down cross. Yeah, you can have, So they don't want to deny that God is real. They can't, but they're just trying to say, well, let us have our fun too. Let us have our opposite to balance it all out. Right? That seems to be kind of the angle they're going for, kind of a dualism, Manichaeism, where they're good and evil are on equal footing.
Right. And like you said, Satan had already framed that, made that the frame for this moment, right? Because you said, David, when you were reading that, she had um in her perception there were two worlds. There was, like you said, the AI world, and then which was like shadowy and sort of technology, and then there was this world she had to escape from. So already there's this dualism of like non-being in both of those, which again set up the frame for this moment that Satan had See, it's funny, and that's why practice is so important, and that we do the things that we do, and we take them seriously as Christians, in not just a formulaic sense, but like it's preparatory, you know. Um, and in the same way, Satan works the same way. He prepped with that dualistic approach of her seeing, her vision was there were two worlds at once, and so it automatically severs the ties to any community that, and that was purely what Satan had thrown a wrench in.
Well, that thing about existing and non-existing, that's a dual worldview too.
Yep.
And you say it that movie that came out, The Matrix, right? Like everything is simulation, and this philosophy or theory or whatever that's really in trending. That's really trending right now. Is this simulation? We are living in a simulation. So are we really, existing, or is like everything is, if everything's a simulation, we're not existing? So it's like a really schizo kind of state of mind where you're, if you go through that formula, like you said, it's preparatory. If you go through that path, then you will end up, in non-being, like this possessed case is showing us.
Yep.
Here it is again in this possession description based on transcriptions. The real is real because of the unreal. The clean, clean because of the unclean. The full, full house. The full, full because of the empty. The perfume, perfume because of the smelly. The holy, holy because of the unholy.
Well, it's like you even see it in Christian circles, right? Like Jesus's mission would not have happened if he had not sinned. You see, the good would not exist if there wasn't any evil.
Right.
Or
yeah,
how would you guys?
ironically, the topic of possession and exorcism is often used as a kind of proof of God's existence, right? If that is real, then there. So,
right.
I mean, ironically, that's what draws folks to even look at it on some level. Eventually, this description says, in a chain of words pasted together in a scream, up, down, fat, thin, high, low, hard, soft, long, short, light, darkness, top, bottom, inside out, all each, all each. It's just, this is undifferentiation, but at the same time, it's kind of a
It's like taking
dualistic
it to the
approach.
next level.
Yeah.
Because it's not just differentiation, it's like taking undifferentiation to the next level, because how would you answer opposites like that, how would you address that? But I mean, there's really no way to address them. Is rationalism fails. You can you can use your empiricism, your materialism, all you want. There's always an argument for nihilism. And that's why Malachi Martin writes in the introduction that these exorcists, they're often very simple people. They're not really deep thinkers.
It says that Marianne's body relaxed. She rolled over jerkily on her other side. In a girlish voice, a seeming instantaneous departure in a new direction. Binaries, we need them, sir. Cybernetics has them. Before and after, plus and minus, odd and even, negative and positive, always to be with us, but just as far as that, with us, not splitting us. Peter would not be pulled aside or try to follow any sense of Marianne's words, that same trap, that constant, easy invitation to defeat. He took up again, he who rules this world has had sentence passed on him already. The Spirit will bring honor to me because it is from me. He who is not with me She took up, interrupting in a dreadfully mocking falsetto, is against me, says the Lord. No man can serve two masters, says the Lord, lowering her tone. Ever see two and it's I won't use those words of cuss words about sexuality, but I guess I used the first one there, but I'm reading as I go. I mean, I've
Oh
read
no.
this, I've heard this before. They're trying to turn everything into a kind of mocking of incarnational truth, right?
Right. It's like your spirit against matter, flesh against soul, that kind of thing. Like the Gnostics did. So when you pair one another against each other, that you're left with you're really left with no solution. You're left with non-being,
Yeah,
and
because
that's
the
basically
entity says, "Whom do men say I am?" says he. Black and white, says he. Now the falsetto rose to a howl that pierced the ears of them, making them wince and grimace. You're in, says he. You're out, says he. The Lord God of ghosts, sheep and goats, says he. Doves and devils, says he. Golden clouds and bloody brimstone, driving a nail in the heart, opening up a gaping wound in my oneness. See, it's all goes back to they're trying to make this undifferentiated, right? Then raising, uh, just that's what it seems to be going on, that in this story. Is there, how do we explain the distinct, the binaries, but yet undifferentiation, Because it's kind of contradictory there. I mean, obviously, we don't want to do what they're doing and try to make logical analysis of what devils are saying, so to speak. But, is this a binary way of thinking, or is this undifferentiation? But it seems to me that text seems to reveal that it is driving back to oneness, of making this all the same.
well. I think the key lies in that there really is nothing except from God, right? Apart from God, you really can't really make sense of it, anything. Like you and specifically the triune God, that number is very significant, because if there's a Trinity, it's like it's canceling, erasing of ancient man's dualistic worldview, right? It's that's the fallen worldview. It's the dualistic worldview, and that's why you have things like the scapegoat mechanism, or you have mimetic rivalry, you have
The
human
wo- the
sacrifices.
woke versus the white supremacist patriarchy.
Yeah, and there is no reconciliation. Mm,
Yeah.
because I mean, think about it. There's a war going on right now,
It's a good
and
point.
in order
You're
to
right. Even though it's a good point you're making. That even though they're driving towards undifferentiation, they still have to have a sharp boundary of binaries. It's weird. It's
right,
just because it
right,
become the binary is those who embrace the undifferentiation chaos and those who stand against it in the mind of the person. That's what they're doing, right, in that story, right? Sheep and goats. Don't say there's a distinction. It's all just one. Let's just embrace it all as equal, right? That's what they're saying. That's a great point, right? So that's
yeah,
what they're
and
getting at there. That entity is saying, hey, just embrace it. It's all one thing. You don't have to make a distinction between sheep and goats or between male and female.
right, and in order to make peace, you have to have third party negotiators, right? I mean, if we see there's a war going on right now, right? And people are all looking at who will be the peacemaker. Blessed are the peacemaker, right? So there's that number three again, right? I mean, maybe I'm overthinking the three part in the Trinity, but it's like it's really it shows you how God is, dealing with the binary, the fallen binary that humans have created in the fallen nature, and this binary with boundaries, it's like it claims to fight against boundaries, but it really does is establish new boundaries that pits us all, neighbor against neighbor,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Anytime you have a binary, you've created fence lines. You've created the no trespass here, you know. And like you said, God's business, uh he brought in a board. It's not a king and a queen. It's a board of trustees. And that's always a better business model.
it's like even if you do fall into competition or animosity against another person, here's God, he's coming down in the incarnation, and he's establishing a bridge through the cross, and that's basically why it's a cross, right? It's vertical and horizontal, right? And it's vertical because it speaks of our relationship with God, and it's horizontal because it's also bridging you know our our relationships on this planet as human beings.
Mm.
And that is basically the answer to this dualistic mindset. You know, it's not like we're not saying that all forms of dualism is bad. Obviously, there's good and evil. That's a dualism, right? But it's like there are certain things which is obviously designed to keep us harming each other, and keep us enslaved, as this girl is to Satan.
Yeah, because the point is that at one time Satan was one. You know, we
Right.
we were one, and so he can play into that and stab that and torture that. You know, um, and I take it back to the garden. You have this tree of knowledge. Don't touch it. There's sort of there's almost a binary in there, but Satan has to break it and enter that binary and again torture it and deceive it, and then he can completely work within that frame from then on out.
Yeah, it's and the thing that in this story with Marianne, the thing that the spirit is tempting him to give into is the fact, reminding him of his sin and how that is what love is really all about. That he had dabbled with his girlfriend in the past, and that trying to mock while he's proclaiming the love of God, saying, well, love is just this. It's just animalism and taking advantage of one another and some kind of animalism, which, hey, it's been very effective for us in our society of convincing the whole world that we're only animals, right? And there is no true love. It's all just, that's why this ideology of wokeism is so powerful, is because once you say that we're all just material animals, then you can say, well, we can create whatever constructs we need through power and through collective action, through use of violence to rearrange this animalism in a more fair and just way, so that the power differentials are brought down in a forcible way. But I think we'll wrap it up here. We've done a lot in this first case study, and I appreciate Jordan and Surit joining me today. Any final thoughts here? A little wrap up thought.
Well, I think we've pretty much. I mean, I've tried to talk about everything that came to my mind when I was reading this book, and really, it's like I was speaking about skepticism, about uh, being skeptical of Father Malachi Martin, but you can really approach this book as you know are as as the way you approach uh, 1984, or A Brave New World, and really, even if you're not convinced by the validity of these stories, uh, you can sort of see how, I mean, that's what we have been trying to do is how really similar all of these things are, to compared to the world we are seeing all around us, with social media and with politics and with culture and everything. And this is a very enlightening book in that regards.
Mhm.
Very good.
Yeah, it brought to mind for me that, Gerard can feel so out of reach sometimes, and so maybe otherworldly, in that it's not really. Obviously, he's studying anthropology, so it has to deal with us. But it can feel something lost in another time sometimes. But all of these aspects that we've talked about are here in a case study, and then they can be broken down and applied to us as well, and we can watch again where we're scapegoating ourselves, where we are propping ourselves up for a sacrifice of community, of socializing, of growing, of becoming more like Christ. And so for me, it's been enlightening to hear what y'all have said, um, and help push me down the road of how many more ways can we make Gerard's thoughts and processes come to life in our day-to-day lives. And it's the more and more we talk like this, the more and more it brings another level of joy to this walk with Christ for me, because I can see so much more now. So I thank y'all for the opportunity.
Oh
Thank you.
yeah, definitely. It was lovely hearing all of your opinions.
Thanks. Take care.